So, Gonky, we talked about the MiG-23 last week.
There's been some interesting stuff come out of that.
There has been. So, Scott Purdue, Flywire, did an interview with Mark Ruff. Is that his name? Mark Ruff?
Yeah.
I keep thinking of Von Ruff because that was my dog's name. But Mark Ruff, who was the backseater in the MiG-23 back 2 weeks ago when this happened. If you remember, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the NTSB preliminary report. So we went off of what they were saying, and they were talking about how the ejection sequence was initiated by the backseater. But when they interviewed both pilots, the front pilot said, I don't know what happened. And the backseater said, I don't remember doing that, but I would have if I had remembered doing that. Like, I agree that the situation was called for. And so there's an interview, and these two guys, from what I understand, they flew S-211. So I looked up Mark Ruff's background because I'm curious, because I wanted to see kind of who's making this decision. Because as we know, the front seater, is it Dave Files? Is that his name? Because they don't ever refer to him by name in this interview. It's always
he's aircraft owner.
Aircraft owner.
He goes by Mark Ryan as well, right? Mark Ruff and Mark Ryan.
Yeah, Mark Ryan Ruff.
Yeah.
Dave Filer, which I think he goes by Files. Anyway, so they don't interview him. They're just interviewing the guy in the back. And the guy in the back is a very experienced pilot. So he flies for an airline, was a business jet guy, and C-17 guard baby, from what I understand, it looks like, which means he would have flown the T-6 in pilot training and the T-1. Unlikely that he flew the T-38 just because that's not how it works. However, it's possible if he went to like NJEP or if he was like fighter tracked and they were like, hey, maybe you should go to C-17s or something. But he flew C-17s in the Guard. We know that. And he's got type ratings on the L-39 and the S-211. So to answer your question from the last episode, Gonky, he was not rated in this aircraft.
Right.
So by pilot observer, that means, because under the FARs, I don't know if this changed or they just started enforcing it, you have to be able to take the training, i.e. you have to be qualified to go get the type rating to even fly in these warbirds, these experimental aircraft. So he had to have at least a PPL. So they're just saying, hey, he wasn't just a guy they plucked out of the street. This dude he's a CFI and all that stuff. He just is not typed, or he doesn't have the experimental authorization to fly a MiG-23. So he's not a MiG-23 pilot yet. May have been training or whatever, but he's not. And the interview starts. There's a 10-minute monologue from Mr. Purdue, which I recommend you probably just skip. But then it gets to the interview. And so let's take a look at what's said, and then we'll kind of talk about just a little bit of it. I don't want to, talk about the whole thing. You need to go to the channel to watch that.
We're getting ready to go to afterburner so you can get the speed. What speed was your target?
Target would have been
450?
Yeah, 350 to 400.
Okay, so you didn't get that. You were what speed when you started?
Maybe
they're talking about the banana pass, and when they went to afterburner, it didn't go to afterburner.
Yeah. So no acceleration, and then I see the throttle come back. I see it come all the way to idle, and then back forward, back into the afterburner range, still no light. And then the engine RPM starts to decay. So it is starting to unwind, and you feel that deceleration. And that's when I said, we need the wings to 16. I said, we got a problem. He said, yep.
But the prelim actually said that the pilot moved the wings to 16 degrees.
Yes, and that's not correct. But you have to understand, you have to give it the context of that situation.
When the NTSB guys talked to you.
Correct. Two representatives from the FAA came into our hospital rooms. And this is 90 minutes to 2 hours after ejecting from the airplane, and wanted to record some statements and conduct an interview.
Okay, let's stop right there. So he's already talked about he moved the wings, which is a little off to me, right? That sounds
he told him. I think he told him. He told him to move the wings.
Right, but he just said he moved the wings, right? Did I hear that right?
The way I understand it is he told the pilot to move the wings, but in the report it said, the pilot just moved the wings on his own without prompting. That's my understanding of it.
So where we're getting at here, right? We're at this point. they're talking to him within 2 hours of the mishap in the hospital, and he's saying, I had a lot of stuff going on. They'd given me stuff. I think we all know, based on airline, military, or whatever, at that point, it's not a good idea to talk. Excited utterances, whatever. You want to wait until you've had some time to digest, talk to counsel, talk to whoever you're going to talk to, union reps.
Get your head right, man.
Whoever's going to help you.
You just almost died.
It's a good idea to wait and not talk to anybody. So, and they should know better too. I mean, the feds know that. There should be time. I understand the urgency to get the story and get it right, but actually, we talk about this in critical incidents. Your most prominent memories of something aren't immediate because your mind's still running through the adrenaline dump and all that stuff. It's about 24 to 48 hours after it happens. That's when you start to remember, what's going on. So anyway.
So you have to keep in mind that for both of us, our backs are broken. We've been through an incredible life-changing event. A little bit of that buffet that you talked about elephants on the wing, the airplane's rumbling.
Yeah,
right?
if they're dancing, they're just kind of dancing. They're on their toes. That means you're outperforming. But at that's the airway break.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Correct.
Progressing up the wing.
Yes. So the air is no longer normalized over the top. It is starting to separate. And I said, Dan, we need flaps. I said, the owner, we need flaps now.
And he had control of those.
He has control. So in the back seat, you move trim, flaps. There's some controls that you move forward to the front seat. And
did he say the owner said we need flaps, or he told the owner that they need flaps?
He told the owner.
Okay.
To the back seat, so that only one person can command them at any given time. And he agreed, so he selected flaps to take off. I can look out over the wing and I can see the slats come in, and there's little notches across the top of the wing when the flap is down that stick up. They're just pieces that go forward of the hinge, so they stick up a little bit. So I think, okay, that's going to buy us a little bit of time. The speed continues to decay. So now it's progressing down to 190, 180.
And your altitude?
Our altitude, he's having to trade. He felt the buffet too, so he's having to lower the nose to trade. So our altitude is now decreasing. I would say 800 AGL or less. The simplest items he might memorize, he's trying to run things up front, but our speed continues to decay. I keep calling that out. And I said, we need flaps full. He agreed, selected flaps to full. So now they've tracked all the way out. At this point, we have cashed in our energy. Either we get the engine back, and I mean roaring back, and then we can level off, and then we can clean up, which is retract flaps, accelerate, get on the front side, and then climb up. And then at that point, you would want to go to high key, essentially, for a simulated flame out.
Okay. So why flaps full, Gogi?
I don't know. I don't want to. Mover and I have no experience in MiG-23, but in
None.
every single airplane I've ever flown, commercial or civilian or military, flaps full is more drag than lift.
Also, yeah, that's your drag. Yeah.
Right. So I don't understand why, if you're behind the power curve and you're running out of airspeed and altitude and ideas, you put the flaps to full. Not only does that create more drag, but stalling is a function of AOA, and you throw the flaps down and you're effectively increasing your AOA, which, that's, the Colgan air crash. That's what the first officer, she threw the flaps down when they were about ready to stall and just worsened the situation. So I don't know why he would say we need flaps full when he's concerned about putting energy on the airplane. But again, maybe that's a procedure in MiG-23, but I highly doubt it, but that's just my own opinion.
Which would be 16,000, 17,000 feet above the airport. I was able to get an emergency call out. So we're trading altitude to preserve the airspeed that we have left, which isn't much. So 180 knots or less. I asked what's in front, and he said, apartments, I'm coming left, something to that effect. Starts to come left, and I said, we're going to have to get out. There was some silence. He might have said something, might have mumbled something. I'm not absolutely sure. And then we got back into the buffet. So the airplane is now rumbling. So the nose is up, but our flight path vector is coming down. And that's that angle of attack split. And that's when, and you feel that it's not a ground rush, but you're just aware that the things in your peripheral vision are getting higher.
They're coming up this way.
They're coming up this way.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, eject, eject, eject. And I grabbed and squeezed the pistol grips. You rotate at the elbows. And that's when the sequence started.
Okay. He talks about the sequence there. We don't need to go through that. Goggy.
Well,
it sounds so that, like, if we didn't know the background, right? Like, if I didn't look up all this stuff and I didn't know, I was just listening to him talk, he sounds like the IP.
yeah.
This sounds like somebody who's calling the shots as the aircraft commander. That is kind of the problem I have with this interview. First, the entire interview, I think, is poorly timed and poorly thought. It's well thought out, probably a little bit too much. It's poorly timed in that they're in the middle of an investigation, and it almost seems like it's trying to get in front of something versus telling a story, because it's very calculated. But this sounds like somebody who's like, I directed this. I told him to go flaps this. I tried to put the wings out. Like, dude, you're in the back seat. You have no SA. You're not typed in this aircraft. Why is this guy calling these shots when the owner of the aircraft is trying to work the problem?
Yeah. Man, I mean, here's the thing. At the end of the day, thank God they're alive, and it's just a MiG-23 that's a smoking hole in the ground.
True. Yes.
Now, what makes this kind of polarizing is usually it's, it would be both guys telling their story together to explain or defend or whatever. And it would be after the official investigation. It wouldn't be, I was really, when you sent me that link, I'm like, this just happened. Like,
right.
and why, and when you listen to him talk, he never refers to the pilot as whatever's, his call sign, his real name, or my buddy or whatever. It's the aircraft owner. And I got to believe that they were probably friends on first name basis or something. So what makes it polarizing is there's probably a disconnect between what actually was happening and what actually happened. And in the reason why I'm interested in it is just, for the safety aspect of it, like what happened? Like, was it communication? Was it, did he just get scared and pull the handle? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I will say this, he paints a picture of ejecting at the last second. Whether that's true, I don't know. There's 2 dead guys from my rag tour because the Wizzo was a half a second too late pulling the handle. So, I always taught, and I'm an advocate of eject early and eject often. And then we'll just sort it out, once we get on the ground. So this is one of those cases where we're just sorting it out on the ground. It's easy to armchair quarterback, but there's a lot of things, the flap thing. And like you said, Mover, he has an awful lot of SA and command authority.
I got you. So I went back because Eric Johnson, great guy, met him at Heli Expo 2 years ago. Awesome American. Eric Johnston, you go to his YouTube channel. He's got over 200,000 subscribers now. He met with this, and I was actually invited, I think this day, because they were flying with the S211s and stuff back when we were talking about fights on, because it's the same group. It's a small community. But he did a walk around, and the guy's so proud. But listen to what he says getting in the back of this aircraft. I laughed at this.
I flew back here for 15 minutes once. I said I'd never fly back here again. But Z.
First of all, that's
look
a Navy
that
guy, dude. That is a Navy guy. But second, look at, dude, I wouldn't fly back here.
No,
like, I hate the back
see.
seat with all the visibility. Dude, this is a coffin. This is like the SR-71 that's just got it. You're sitting below the canopy rail, when it's down, because we'll show that here in a second. He'll talk about it, but you've got a periscope that can see forward, but it only works slow speed with the gear down. Otherwise it blows up. So they're not using a periscope. All you've got is the side windows. Dude, you don't have hardly any SA in the back of this thing, especially not being qualified in the jet.
You're a passenger.
You are a passenger. Like, I'm not 100% sure. And I know some people have brought up the whole observer thing. What is an observer doing in the back of this aircraft that really has limited ability to give you any extra essay. I mean, it's almost like, hey, we just had an empty seat back there. Why don't you log some time? Like,
Yeah.
what? I mean, now granted, you could be looking at your GPS for flight, keeping me in the airspace. You know, there's stuff you can do, but it's not outside. Like there's not a whole lot of visibility back here. Watch what he talks about. Hold on.
Said, hey, I don't want anything for the check ride. Just let me fly in the front once. I go, oh, damn it. So I guess I'll have to sit back here one more time.
So he's got a GPS.
So
back
welcome.
there. But look at this. I mean, this is all original gauges.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we're just speaking in metric back here.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that might be.
Looks like a Garmin, right? Maybe.
I don't know if that's a
market.
GPS or one of those. You know, the ADI. You know, the digital flight path, all that stuff.
Could be the Radarski.
It's like an airport around here. All right, welcome to the back seat
But
of
look how. I mean, you don't have any.
MiG-23UB trainer variant. It's also affectionately called the coffin. Very, very poor visibility back here. There is a little bit of side glass here, and you can see a little bit to the left of the pilot's head and not much to the right of the pilot's head at all.
All right, so that's what he's dealing with back there. There's not much situational awareness. There's not much.
No.
Like that's to me what doesn't match is this sounds like a 2,000 hour MiG-23 guy going, well, I told him to do this, it didn't work. I told him to do this, it didn't work. I could see the ground rushing at me, and I'm out. But me as a, 1,500 hours in fighters, several thousand hours total time, I look at this and go, I'd be clueless back here. Like, no idea what's going on.
Yeah, it's funny you bring this video. It kind of brings me back when I first joined the Air Force Reserve. When I first got to the squadron, I did a couple backseat flights when I was brand new to the T-38. Actually, I'd never flown the T-38A. So when they checked me out in the T-38, it was in the C, which was digital. When I got to our squadron, they were A models, the old ones with different. And dude, they put me in the back, and even though you can see a lot better in the 38, and I had a qual in the airplane, I would, just because my normal scan pattern wasn't there because nothing was where it was supposed to be. I was shocked at how little SA I actually had.
Yeah. And he talks about this in the tour. It's not like a T-38 where you can see up and over.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, I mean, the only way you see over is that periscope.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's it raises questions in my mind, timeliness, kind of the content, kind of the who, what, when, where, why. On the flip side, because I think it is important to be fair, because I don't think I think this is a whole gray area. Like this entire thing is gray area.
Oh, yeah.
On the flip side, number one, I would love to have heard from the owner. I mean,
I'm sure we will.
He's the guy. Well, he's waiting for the investigation, which I think is the thing to do.
Yeah.
I would love to hear that. But second, let's say he is right. Let's say everything in that interview is correct, and there's no reason not to believe him. I'm just saying there's stuff that raises questions. He's right? Get out before sink rate develops. That's true. Your ejection envelope changes based on whether the aircraft is mushing in or whether it's straight and level. We talked about controlled, uncontrolled. Whether it's 15,000 feet uncontrolled, 2,000 feet controlled, 6,000 feet, 2,000 feet, whatever aircraft you're flying, it's always different. So, yes, he was probably in a position, where he assessed that if he's assessing that there's a sink rate, he doesn't have much time, especially as the speed's bleeding back. Absolutely, great decisions. But they did the math and they said, "Hey, you got one swing in the chute. That's awesome." I've got no problem with that. They talk about air start. Air start really only applies the window when the engine is not producing anything. So it's not windmilling. You need to get to a speed to let it windmill because you're letting the wind mill, the wind is doing the thing. This engine, from what I understand, at the very least was turning. So it might not have been producing thrust, but it was turning. So we're not talking about air start envelopes necessarily. We're talking about either, getting the engine nozzle back to where it needs to be or producing thrust. However, I don't know the MiG-23, so I don't have a problem with that either. We clarify that it's not a true air start envelope because it's turning. It never stopped turning, from what I understand.
It's still lit.
Right.
Allegedly.
It's still lit. It's just
Right.
not producing thrust. Now, if you have to shut it down, it's still turning. It's not, it doesn't just, unless it compressor stalls or gets fire fodder or frozen,
Right.
it's still going to be turning. So you're not necessarily needing to get in that big window. So that's kind of a different consideration in general. But what I would like to know is, what was the pilot in command thinking or doing? Because this still, I go back to our first conversation. Doesn't matter, the details will be, I don't want to, we're not going to speculate to the point that, we're trying to solve the mystery. I'm asking questions.
What was the actual problem is the main question. It's like, what was actually the problem?
And I think we're going to go back. Even our initial assessment is going to be accurate. It's a crew coordination thing, because if this interview is 100% correct, I think there's a crew coordination problem, because the backseater is driving this fight.
Yeah.
This does not sound like a back and forth, back me up in the checklist. This is, hey, put the wings out. Hey, put the flaps out. And it's like, we don't know, because we're never going to know, right? There's no FADEC, there's no digital equipment recording, there's no DVR as far as I know. We don't know what the pilot was doing. If you're telling, imagine the SA dump, right? If you're in the middle of working a problem, if you got somebody in the back going, hey, put this, do this. Hey, do this. And you're like, hold on, dude, I was just like, I'm working this problem. Like, it doesn't sound like there was a lot of back and forth just from what he's saying.
Yeah. And I always try to put myself like in their pilot's shoes. And I mean, probably the T-38's the closest thing to MiG-23 that we've flown. And I would never consider putting the flaps to 60 to buy more time. You know what I'm saying? Like, at that point,
yeah.
I mean, we talk in a couple seconds. I'm like, I'm just going to shell out of it. So, I mean, clearly the guy flying didn't deem it.
But he did
necessary.
it. If you look at the pictures, they did it. So
I know, but maybe he just did it because hey, okay. I don't know, man. I don't know, but it's odd to me.
Yeah. And it's also odd. I can understand the bailout decision. You've got more experience with backseaters than I do. Everybody I've ever flown in the backseat, other than you're the only, well, there you go. You and T-Bear, but we were in T-38s, right? If you punched out, see you later, I'm going to land this thing and laugh at you.
Yeah.
But we're in a jet where two people, other than IP student coordination, in which case the IP does hold a hammer, because the IP is qualified in the aircraft. In this situation, I've never been, I'd love to get Rain Waters on here, because that's a perfect example. He flew, he's got a video on the Afterburn podcast of him flying a C-130 guy. That is more equivalent to this, where you take somebody that's got wings on their chest, they've been through some level of pilot training, but they're not single seat fighter guys. So how much input do you take from somebody that is not qualified? None.
Well, I mean, think about like T-Bear's last flight, right? I had his buddy in the back who's a C5 guy.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And he didn't have a lot of SA back there, because I mean, he's he's not his, it's not a familiar cockpit to him. Right. And I mean, we went out and flew, and I was having to, just talk, I was giving him like I was a tour guide, and it was pretty apparent to me that he was just along for the ride. And I can't actually imagine him having enough SA in a real emergency, other than, hey, dude, I see the flames back here.
Well, so there was, now I will say, it makes me think of another such scenario where I had one of the lieutenants flying with me. Remember little short guy? He looked like a little miniature version of Red.
Oh, yeah.
God, he was such a sharp kid too.
Super smart.
Yeah, he was a smart guy. And that's, so I took him in the back. We did one of the ACT rides, the big 4V 20 something, right? And he's not qualified in the jet, but he's riding because he wants to sandbag to get some experience. So he's got T-38 experience. So he's been through IFF and stuff. And we go through, like, we're just trucking along till we're moving, and an F-22 comes like from high to low, like scorching through our block, because he has no idea we're there. And he called him out. Like, he's like, hey man, look at your 2 o'clock high. I was like, holy Jesus. Okay. I'm writing that time down.
Yeah,
and I would,
thanks.
So that is an example of somebody which may be the case here, somebody who's studying for it. Right. So, Mr. Ruff could be studying towards because what impressed me about the interview is he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Like, he's saying things about systems, about MiG-23 stuff that I'm like, that sounds like somebody that, at first I thought he flew it. It wasn't until I looked it up that I'm like, well, he's not a a rated guy, he didn't take the check right, but that doesn't mean he doesn't know. So it is feasible, like it is believable that he was well versed in the aircraft because he was studying and he was riding along to get build hours towards his own type rating.
Yeah, man, when I was an IP in the Rhinoceros Super Hornet, and I was in the back, so the like BFM, for example, the dynamic flights,
basic fighter maneuvers going
right. So when we would start doing BFM, obviously the pilot, whoever the student up front flying, you could easily tell his bucket quickly full, right? A little bit overwhelmed. So what a good backseater will do, and even I've flown with Wizzos that have done this with me as the stick monkey up front, is, for example, to not hit the deck or in energy low scenarios or too much energy. You feed the pilot like minimal info because he's already in info overload, and I'm sure
directive descriptive. Yeah.
And you really got to be careful, because if you start doing what this guy alleges he did, it's really easy to start just becoming a voice activated machine.
Puppet master.
Yeah. You stop.
Dance.
Right.
Geppetto.
Exactly. You stop being a pilot and you just start being an extension of the voice that's coming to you. And I remember as a student kind of doing that, because I'm not doing so well. The IP's trying to help, but he's feeding me too much. And now I'm just I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing what he told me right now.
OFF, turn the goddamn temperature down. Heat is on, sir. Heat is on.
But like, I just can't imagine having a non-rated guy in the back of my airplane. I'm the PIC, and him telling me these things, because he's telling him things he probably should already know.
Right. I mean, we're talking boldface at this altitude.
Right.
You're not in the checklist. That's what strikes me. And I will say we shouldn't be having this conversation because I don't think an interview is appropriate with an ongoing investigation.
Exactly.
I've got stuff that's been going on for the last year that I haven't talked about on this channel, because I'm like, well, there's still the chance that justice will prevail, and I don't want to ruin that.
Right.
Yeah. You just don't want to get you don't want to muddy the narrative. I get that. Like I'd be mad too, right? If I knew that what I did was right and the NTSB came out and said, this dumbass in the back, he doesn't know if he ejected, he punched them both out, I would just wait for the narrative. I'd wait for, wait and not try to do it. The fact that it's happening now just strikes me as, it just raises questions. Yeah. That's all. I just don't understand the dynamic here. The crew coordination of somebody who, second, third, fourth, fifth time even in the jet from the back seat. Dude, I guarantee you the owner, like he was just talking about, the owner, you throw him in the back seat, his essay is gone. You start talking about ground rush and sinking feeling, dude, you've got the blinders on. You might as well be doing an instrument check ride. And unless he's telling me, hey, I'm watching the VSI, VVI, the vertical speed, and it's pegged through the floor, you don't have that essay. You don't know, because it just like there's not enough sensory cues to tell you.
No.
And you do have a lot of time compression. You do have a lot going on. At the end, what I hope we find out is, number one, what was the actual status of the thrust in the engine? What was it producing? And what was the PIC's perception of this at the time? Was he, like you said, was he overwhelmed and about to ride this thing in because he didn't know, he thought he had more time than he did? Because it's true. I've done a, mishap investigation, board reports, snowbirds at Kamloops. Sometimes we get out too late and we don't want that to happen. But if there was a chance that this guy's like, hey, I knew based on my training experience, knowledge, whatever, that this thing was about to go flying again, I would like to hear that from him. And I would like to hear the explanation, because at the end of the day, he signed for that jet, not the guy in the back.
Yeah. But like I said, at the end of the day, both guys are alive.
True. Yeah.
And it's just
I agree with that.
MiG-23. It's just.
But what happens if it,
well, and we talked about the repercussions of this, right? Because if
we could still have unintended consequences, because look at, our federal government loves to, oh God, put the banner up, Douglas. Well, I mean, we like to have knee-jerk reactions, and
100%.
But for the grace of God go I, right? I'm not saying I would have done anything better or different. I just have questions that I think, that are raised by looking at this. It's a very fascinating case.
Yeah.
But we've had the B-17. We've had Draken. We've had multiple, events like this now. And the question then becomes, at what point is the FAA going to go, you know what? When you get your experimental authorization, we only said you could go within an X radius of your airport, not to overfly populated areas. What happens when they say either you safe the seats and you ride it in on these jets, which I would never fly. I probably wouldn't fly MiG-23 period, but I sure wouldn't fly one with a cold seat. Or what happens when they say, you know what? No more warbirds that are civilian owned at air shows.
Well, I mean, you bring up the FAA. I mean, remember when we were looking at doing
the show
Fight for Honor, right?
Douglas, where's the banner, man?
The thing we ran into was the FAA was like, hey, you can't take passengers.
Yeah, well, that's what happened with that. So I got offered the dogfight air race show, the one that was going to go and tour around the country and be like Formula, and they couldn't get approval.
Right.
The FAA is like, the hell you are. What are you're going to do an air show over people and take in? No, we're not. They're very conservative when it comes to that, rightfully so. But we as the aviation community have a responsibility to keep that trust. And, I mean, and
I think there should be
decision is a big thing. I'm not going to say me as a fighter pilot would, I mean, we like to romanticize the ejection decision and be like, well, he did it. He didn't eject because he was trying to avoid this, which 9 times out of 10 ends up not being the case.
Right.
I'm going to say it's a big responsibility and requires training. It requires training and experience. And
well, what we don't want to happen is no more warbirds. Because honestly, man, air shows are awesome because we have warbirds like World War II. Dude, I'd love to see, some Century Series stuff. I've flown with the, the Sea Furies and the, of course, I like all that stuff.
Well, dude, awesome. Eventually when these books turned into movies in 20 to 30 years, I want to buy a Viper. So I don't want to turn this off.
That's right.
But I'm just saying, I don't want to see it because, the whole one guy shits himself, we all have to wear diapers. I don't want to see that happen in any form or whatsoever. So I hope that cooler heads prevail. But the reality of this situation is we almost had a very big mishap.
Yep.
And it's important that we understand.
A bigger mishap.
Right. We're very fortunate that it did not become a bigger story than just, hey, man, you shouldn't have done an interview 2 weeks after it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's the biggest problem and we only lost a MiG-23.
Yeah. That's a win.
It used to be a target. These jets used to be FOD anyway. We were going to shoot them down. All right. Well, lost one in the golf course.
Yeah. It will be interesting, though. See what happens of it. We'll just have to wait.
One of the MiG-23 guys, there's a YouTube video even linked in the thing that it had happened. And it also had happened in this actual aircraft. So it was something which can go either way, right? You can say it's happened in this aircraft. Therefore, it's a progressive failure and there was no fixing it. But you can also say it's happened in this aircraft and I'm the owner of this aircraft and I know it's going to happen and I know exactly what to do. Just give me a minute.
Yeah. Well, Boris, they've had, I know a guy who accidentally punched out of a Hornet behind the ship and it flew around for a while by itself.
Yeah.
And
well, it did not keep flying. Now, granted, its trajectory, it's in a turn. It's not gonna, I've heard many, F-16 where the jet comes and buzzes you and
you're like, dang it.